Welcome to a special edition of the AusComX show. Tonight we are talking about this Kickstarter and the gentlemen behind it, at least some of them, the Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron REBIRTH. So, without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Shane.
Hi, mate.
Well, how are you, Dave? Tad?
Yeah, good.
Well, what I thought we might start with is just so some people out there who might not know you guys. So we'll just go through one at a time, just a little about yourself. We'll start with you, Shane. Just
Start with me.
Tell us about you and how you are part of this project.
Comic reader from way back. Started with the Phantom, became a Marvel fan in the 60s. Read comics pretty well all my life. Still love the 60s, 70s, some of the 80s stuff most. I vaguely remember being introduced to Cyclone with the Southern Squadron in it and Dark Nebula in it, and sending some stuff in to Tad. Pretty much sent it to Tad first. My version of Dark Nebula was much more Marvel at the time. So, yeah, my influences really are Jack Kirby, John Buscema, a lot of other stuff as well, but I like that more sort of mainstream look. And I did some work, and the first work I actually had published in Australia in X was an Aurora Presents.
Okay.
You know, where I think the first one I did was one that Dave wrote. Wasn't it? It was Southern Squadron and Bodine's characters, the werewolf.
That's right. Yeah.
Remember that?
Daphne's Curse,
No. Yeah, and I got it from Tad. So these guys are involved all the time. I got the script from Tad, but Dave had written it. I did the second part of it, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I did
Yes,
the
you
Dark
did.
Nebula, which sat on the shelf for a long time. And bits and pieces ever since. Yeah, I think I started in 5 years. I ran a show a month in Crash magazine. It was, that was called The Saga of Sharkaroon. I don't know where it's at, but it's well over 15 years ago now. Is that enough? Is that what you want to know?
Yeah, just a little about yourself so people can... And you are the artist on this, aren't you?
Yes. Much to my surprise. Yes.
Yes, that's awesome. Oh, I guess we'll... Dave, you can go next.
Okay. I started doing comics actually by creating a bunch of superheroes called the Southern Squadron. This was almost 40 years ago. In fact, in about 31, 32 days' time, it'll come around for its 40th anniversary. Yeah, so it was in 1983. They first appeared in Cyclone, in AusComX, which was published in Sydney. It appeared in AusComX 1 and 2. Then about 3 years later, Gary Challoner got in touch, and we ended up publishing a Southern Squadron in the pages of Cyclone. It was part of a 4-part anthology or 4-title anthology. There was the Dark Nebula. Dark Nebula had already appeared in its own title in 1982, so it beat Southern Squadron out by a year. And then we had the Southern Squadron, the Jackaroo, which was part of a broader concept called Harry and the New Heroes. And then there was also the original Golden Age Southern Cross. I had a Southern Cross in the Southern Squadron storyline, and so there was some talk about maybe changing the character's name to the Southern Star, and I said no, the characters are not going to be confused because one's set in the 1940s, the other's set in the 1980s. Why don't we leave them in, and one can be inspired by the other. And so we've actually had a bit of fun with that over the years. Within fairly short time, the Gary Challoner's storyline started to introduce some of the Southern Squadron characters. This is by issue 3. I then introduced some of Gary's characters into the Southern Squadron storyline, and then we introduced one of Tad's characters, which was the Grandstander, which was a villain, which appeared in the first of the Dark Nebula stories. And so by that stage, we started to get something that was resembling what became known as the Cyclone universe of characters. And story short, that sort of blew up, expanded till the point where we ended up with the Southern Squadron then being exported to America. Did very well there. We had Dark Nebula also bringing out its own title. The Southern Squadron took over the Cyclone mainstream title. So with issue 9, this been called Cyclone and suddenly became called Southern Squadron. So there is no Southern Squadron number 1. There was Cyclone 8 and then Southern Squadron 9. That's how, like the way they did it with Spider-Man. Like Shane, we were very heavily influenced by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and so a lot of their approach to the early Marvel sort of was done by us. Interestingly, the Dark Nebula was set in the future of the Cyclone universe, and was I think Dark Nebula's origin story happened about the time that I ceased publishing Southern Squadron. So this became something that Tad and I thought we could maybe create a story which sort of chronologically continued the Southern Squadron storyline, and then and then was the bridge between the Southern Squadron series of comics and the Dark Nebula series of comics. And the Southern Squadron had popped up in the Dark Nebula comics, but there'd never been a sort of a storyline where the two had merged together. So when we talk about the Southern Squadron and the Dark Nebula story being together for the very first time, we're sort of having a little bit of a cheek wink, but the reality is that in the chronology of these characters, this story is designed to be the first time that the Southern Squadron and the Dark Nebula meet, even though in publishing history they've met many, many times over the years. So I ended up doing a lot of stuff for Marvel and DC Comics back in the late 80s, early 90s. Then I moved into film and television, and it always kept a bit of a hand on what I was doing with comics. We brought the Southern Squadron back with a sort of a newer look, many of the elements of which have been retained since, and that was woven into a sort of a horror comic, which was sort of a look back at that Bronze Age, and that was with In Decay. So there was a Southern Squadron story, horror story. There was a Dark Nebula one. There was I think it was Stump. There's a whole bunch of them. It was really fun. And so I'd always been thinking of bringing the characters back at some point. And then when COVID hit, as you know, Shane, a lot of us started to meet up on the net. We had the Ugle Club Reconnect, which was a virtual version of basically a Thursday night pub evening that we used to catch up with back in the 80s in Sydney. And during that time, Tad and I were looking at stuff that we'd done in the past. And we also had guys like Gary Della showing up. Gary Reverie is as old as Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula. That goes back to 1983 or 82 or 83 as well. And so it just seemed to make sense. And Gary Della was, as you know, doing Torn. I really loved what he was doing there, and we sort of started talking about doing a Torn crossover. Tad and I were talking about doing a Southern Squadron crossover with Dark Nebula. Long story short, we've all kind of got together and we've got this idea of a Torn Southern Squadron crossover series, a Southern Squadron Dark Nebula crossover series, and there's also in the works a Dark Nebula and Torn crossover series. So these will end up with 3 series of 3 books, 9 books all up, where these characters all come together. And we're not exactly we're not inventing the term the Aussie superhero renaissance, but we're sort of definitely giving it a really good kick along. And so that's probably enough from me. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Well, Tad, I saved you for last because this is an important year for you, and especially for Dark Nebula. So tell us, why is this year an important year?
Well, it's important because Dark Nebula has turned 40 this year, and as Dave was saying, next year is the Squadron's 40th, and the main reason why we're doing this crossover is to celebrate both anniversaries. I know it's leaking into the 40th birthday of the squadron more so, but the truth of the matter is, it really doesn't matter when it all comes out. I mean, it is literally starting in Dark Nebula's 40th birthday and does spill over into the squadron's 40th. And as far as I'm concerned, I think if Dark Nebula's 40th does in fact spill over into the next year, then more's the better. But it's going to be a joint celebration, and that's why with this project, it's very important that people realize this is the Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron, not the Dark Nebula with special guest stars or strategic guest stars of Southern Squadron. When I first approached Dave with this idea, I'd had this one brewing in my mind for quite a few years, because back when Dark Nebula turned 25, and Shane, you were there for this. We reinvented the origin of the Dark Nebula with what became the graphic novel Origins, and it was a retelling. But what I realized was important was we needed. If I was just going to tell the story verbatim the way it was before, where's the mystery? What new information is there? You know, people needed new information in that, and so I approached the Dark Nebula's origin then with providing information that simply wasn't in the first one. Not saying that I've just decided to chuck this stuff in, but to give them the information they didn't get the first time around. And it was a golden opportunity to really explore aspects of it. And without word of a lie, a couple of years before this was released, and in fact, while I was convalescing from this, I actually had a near-death experience in a car accident with a horse. And oddly enough, that gives you a greater understanding of your own intellectual property. He becomes the Dark Nebula after he dies, and he is brought back. Now, when you have a near-death experience, I'd say I had a unique perspective for it, and I appreciated that. I guess in a way that was a coping mechanism, because people can wallow in their grief, they can have survivor's guilt or anything like that, or you can use it, and that's what I did. I used it, but after doing that origin, like I said, for a while I had the idea that if I was going to do the origin again, I would love to have the squadron with the scenes in between. And I pitched that to Dave, and Dave took that and he ran with it, and boy did he run with it. And it made it exactly what I wanted it to be, a joint exercise, so that every character got their moment. There are scenes that will be seen in issues 2 and 3, and we bounced ideas around about things like, well, where's the Dingo's place in all of this from the squadron, and we talked about those things, because if these characters are there and all they're doing is showing up, well, what's the bloody point? So everyone has their moment. And that's the important thing. And so when people pick it up and read it, they can embrace it and go, yes, these are the characters we love. And it's great to see them interacting like this. I mean, when we look at how all the Cyclone crossovers worked back in the day, literally everything built up to something. And as Dave was saying, having the squadron and Gary's characters interact, and to do the Southern Squadron crossover story, where it was a story of 2 Southern Crosses, one in the Golden Age, one in the present day. The one thing that was missing in the mix was Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron, and we peppered that, like, for argument's sake. Pardon me. In Dark Nebula 2, he meets the modern age Dave's Southern Cross for the first time. And then and that literally led to the big payoff, which was the Dark Nebula Southern Squadron crossover in Dark Nebula 7 and 8, which Dave and I co-wrote, and Jason Paulos from Hairbutt the Hippo fame illustrated, because he was the series artist on that at the time. And I have to say, between my putting a rocket under the distributors at the time and the fact that we put all the winning elements in those 2 issues, they were 2 of the best-selling books out of the Cyclone line. I was very proud about that, and it resonated with us. And not only that, and Dave didn't know about this till I shared it with him years later, I kept all the fan mail from Dark Nebula 7 and 8, which included a shit ton of fan art. And so actually in Dark Nebulas 11 and 12, a lot of that fan art is finally seeing the light of day in what I would call a soft resurrection of the letters page, being Dark Secrets. And, you know, all these things, it all comes together. So when we came to talk about doing the Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron, again with the tagline "Together Again" for the first time, it was just something that it just seemed to organically come together. And I could only see this working one way, that it was Dave, myself, and Shane. You know, that's the A team as I see it. And, you know, we pull out all stops on it. So I'm very proud with what we're doing with this crossover. The Kickstarter is already, you know, reflecting that in terms of initial backers, and we would hope that continues during the course of the month. So we're you know, we want to make sure that we remind people just how great these characters are and how great they can be. And the most important thing, as I've been saying up till now, whenever something is reinvigorated decades later, it's usually someone who's come along later with no emotional tie to it, and so they decide, oh look, I'm going to make these changes, I'm going to make those changes. No, it's us. It's the creators. And any retconning and any MCUing, for want of a better term, we're doing it because they're our characters. We love them, and we don't want people to think that we're doing something tired, because it's going to serve 2 purposes. One, it's going to resonate with people who've been there all along, but most importantly, and this always happens, even though, you know, it's hard for us to see, new people are coming along. New people want to pick up something now and read it, rather than go, oh, hang on a moment, I've got to find 40 years of history so I can catch up. You know, they don't want to they don't want to have to take a you know, get a master's degree in Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron. They want to be able to read this and enjoy it and know that it's self-contained, rather than, oh, hang on, I've got to find this book and that book and these other books. No. Again, 2 purposes. One person, you know, a person can read this and say, and literally this is like, you are here. That's it. You know, this is where we start. This is the launch pad for the future. And if people want to go back and get the old stuff, fine. I mean, we're not stopping them from doing that, but at least they're not going to, you know, hurt themselves trying to figure out who these characters are and what they're all about. It's all there for them to see, day one for them.
Awesome. So Tad, great jumping on point. Yeah.
If I could jump in, because I noticed somebody has just asked, will the first-time readers understand the characters without needing an origin backstory? And the answer is absolutely. One of the great joys of working with Cyclone was that every time we went to press, what was common with comics was that you would bring out a #1, and then whatever the sales were for #1, that would be the biggest you'd ever get for the series. And then the sales of #2 would be slightly less, and the sales of #3 slightly less again, and it would sort of slowly trail off until it found its equilibrium. Not so with Cyclone. We actually started And with issue 2, we actually had a bigger sell than issue 1. Issue 3 was bigger again, and it was always constantly growing. And so we became very consciously aware of that. And what we tried to do was we always wrote stories with the assumption that at least some, if not most, of the people who were coming in were new to the characters. So we would always look after the real characters, those people who'd been with us from the start and had been cut in and had a previous relationship with us. But in addition, we would also be looking at the new people, and we'd always have those two demographics very firmly in mind. So as a result of that, and this is why the style of the writing was very like the Stan Lee approach, because Stan Lee had a similar attitude back in the early 60s. So we would actually time out. We would break the fourth wall, and we would actually say, okay, dear reader, if you're wondering who that person is over there, that character appeared 3 issues ago, don't worry. All you need to know to make sense of this story is blah, 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 blah. So we're kind of breaking the story up. But then we were like a little editorial note that people could get, okay, and that gave them comfort. So yes, we will be adopting the same approach with this particular series. If you've never read the Southern Squadron or the Dark Nebula, doesn't matter. This will be like as if you're meeting them for the first time. On the other hand, if you do know them, there'll be a lot of in-jokes and a lot of things in there that will be exciting, that, will, I guess, reward those who've been loyal to the characters all along. The other thing I'd also like to just tap in here is that one thing that we did with Cyclone was we never begged for people to be involved. I get people saying, "Oh, can you support my Kickstarter because you're a mate or because of this or that?" I support Kickstarters because I generally believe that the content is going to be enjoyable to read. I don't believe in actually backing something out of loyalty. I really think if that's what this series needs to succeed, then it's going to fail. I mean, I want people to read these comic stories because they're bloody fun. They're good. And there's another reason. I have a huge stack of rock vinyl from the 60s and 70s. I never got rid of it. My kids are clamoring to get hold of it. And, when I die, I'm sure they'll be picking through it very quickly. What was really cool about if you had bought Led Zeppelin 4, you don't just have a piece of history, but you were part of the reason why that album was successful. Your little purchase was part of the success of that album. And there are people, if you've managed to pick up a copy of Cyclone from the 80s that you've picked up in retrospect, look, thank you. That's great. I'm glad you've got an artifact from the past. But I really think that those people who are actually there back then, who actually, like Shane, bought them and read them and were part of our success. Shane, you were, as a reader, let alone as a creator, you were one of the reasons of why we succeeded. It was that same ownership. The same goes for those people who are going to pick up these comics now. If you buy this comic, you are going to be part of this renaissance. You will be as much a part of this as we are. And don't buy it because you want to help us out. We're big enough and ugly enough. What we want you to do is buy it because you genuinely think this is something you want to be a part of. You want to be a part of history, that you personally want to make this thing a reality.
Well said.
Shane.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say
because I remember. Sorry.
No, you go, Shane.
I was just going to say, I remember when I bought them off the newsstand. I think it was number Cyclone 5. Would that have been the first one that went to the newsstand?
It was widely distributed. Yeah,
cover.
it would have been definitely.
Yeah, and obviously sales. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember rightly, 5 came out. I bought 6 off the stands after 7, or was it 5 after 6? Two of them in Queensland came the wrong way. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah. But I was always really interested in that. I thought the heroes were sort of good, but they were so Aussie, so un-American, and the sense of humour was really, really on the edge. And it made me laugh on the one hand and think, oh, what am I reading here on the other? It was really, really very clever. I was very impressed. I really, I really liked it. Dark Nebula. Oh, look at that. That's an old drawing now.
I know, and I wonder if this holds the Guinness record for being the oldest what do you call them? The oldest.
The longest held in reserve.
Yeah, the longest held in reserve. I've actually aphasia
On the shelf.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
It's
having sat on the shelf for the longest time, without waiting to be published. I
find it really interesting because I drew that story, Dinosaurs in Tasmania, when I had started it, and I was still drawing it when I got my job in the ambulance in 1991. The year I retire from the ambulance is the year it's published 30 years later. So I think I'm pretty sure I finished it in 1992 and it came out in 2022. So my whole ambulance career
30 years
while that book was sitting on the shelf.
Yeah, 30 years as sitting on the shelf. But that tagline I've used, 65 million years in the making, or 30 years, depending on your point of view.
It's almost literal.
Honestly. But I'll be honest, when I scripted it, I left it till the last moment to lay down the final script because I wanted it to be as contemporary as possible. And oddly enough, not one moment of it seemed dated. So it held up pretty well because it's meant to be a comment on the human condition. But anyway, enough about Dark Nebula 10. I'll put that back to one side. We're here about Dark Nebula and the Southern Squadron.
Shane, can I? Do you mind if I share the screen with a few of the?
Yeah, share screen. Yeah, okay. Go ahead. I'll bring it up.
So, as well as the can you all see that? There we go.
No. Oh.
Hey, there we are.
There we go. So as well as Aussie superhero renaissance, as well as the rebirth storyline, which you can see there in the third and the fourth covers. As we spoke about, I've also been working with Rob Lyle, who I think might even be in the chat at the moment, on another comic, which is the Torn Southern Squadron crossover. So you can see a couple of the covers there, beautifully drawn by Ben Sullivan. And there's another book that's going to be part of the Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula Rebirth book, and that is the Southern Squadron Dark. And maybe we should just talk a little bit about this since it's part of the Kickstarter campaign as well. This gentleman here, Beaumont Jardine, we know him as Bodine America. Would have been great if he'd been on tonight, but unfortunately we seem to have some internet problems there. But Bo is he was part of the Fantastique group. Fantastique was a book that came out, a horror comic, was banned in a lot of states. I don't think it got its way up to Queensland, Shane. It was hugely successful because it was funded by the New South Wales government as a sort of like one of these campaigns to encourage people to get out there and have a go. And interestingly, it was almost like the comic to Cyclone. It was a sort of a spin-off of AusComX, and in fact, a lot of the Cyclone guys worked on Fantastique, and some of the Fantastique guys worked on Cyclone as well. So there was a very close relationship. Bo was he always liked to do these sort of really dark sort of fantasy stuff, which sort of crossed the superhero horror genres together. And so as a result of that, Bo came to me a couple of years ago and said, sorry?
For everybody?
Say again? No, sorry, you dropped out. So what Bo did was he came to me and said he would very much like to do a sort of a dark, evil version of the Southern Squadron. And I said, okay, well, then go for your life. Let's see what you can come up with. So I can give you a little bit of an idea of Bo's art style. These are some poster images, if you like, that are going to be used as part of the promotion. So you can see here his version of the Southern Squadron and Southern Cross. Night Fighter and Southern Cross. This is a dwarf Nebula character, a little I think it's a cerumen. So you can see it's beautiful artwork. The actual series itself is going to be in black and white, but Southern Squadron Dark. That's the series, and so that's Southern Squadron Dark is one of the titles which. Whoops, sorry. Southern Squadron Dark is one of the titles which is included in that group, and so you can see here, this is getting a bit into the advertising stuff, if you want to actually pick up, there are lots of different combinations on the Kickstarter where you can get one cover or another. We've got the Ash Maddie version of the cover. We're building a backstory relationship between Mark Medulla, the Dark Nebula, and Lieutenant Smith, that they have a romantic backstory, that when he was training to be an astronaut, he was actually, I think, one of her mentors when she was going through officer cadet training. So we're celebrating that with that cover. We have the main cover, of course, drawn by Shane, which just oozes Jack Kirby. And then you can see Bodine's work. He's got two covers. I guess the A cover, the one where the characters are sort of there in green, is sort of, I guess, a reasonably traditional superheroic look. But Bo's actually also come up with another cover, which is about Dictopia, which is the place that this story is set in, kind of an alternate reality. And in this location, you know how like the Watchmen series starts off with the first image of the story being on the cover? Bo wanted to do that with this series as well. So we've gone with two versions of the cover, one which is sort of, I guess, narrative, and the other one which is sort of like there to sell. So that's the mega pack for those who want to get all four. And we've actually, Gary Della was actually saying we're probably being a little bit too generous, because we've actually tried to create it so that if you get all four floppies and both the PDFs, you're going to be able to pick them up for the price of 3 comics. So that was something we really wanted to do, just to make sure that everybody who wanted to have a chance at both could have that. And
Very cool.
Got everybody doing that. I could give you a little bit of a tease of some of the artwork that's Shane's worked on. I've been doing the color art on this. This was one that I think you nailed right from the start, Shane. And yes, there's an element of Mad Max coming through here. The Southern Squadron always had their Squadron Mobile being like an FJ Holden, so we sort of combined that with a sort of a desert approach. And this is, as you can kind of see, the storyline is centered around an alien probe coming to Earth up in the Pilbara, actually, and the Southern Squadron going in to investigate. Meanwhile, up in space, Mark Medulla goes onto the Threshold, which is a spacecraft, to find, to his horror, that it's now overcome by zombies. I'm not going to spoil the story by telling any more than that, but that should be enough of a tease to give you a bit of an idea of what it's like. And just so people get a little bit of a taste of what's coming, because Gary Della will kill me if I don't at least show you this. Here's some of the amazing Ben Sullivan art that of the story that Spedsy and I put together, Rob Lyle, and you can see there's some little fantasy characters in this who are the villains. This is the Dingo. This is where the Dingo suddenly interacts with Torn, and the fighting begins. I'm jumping around a little bit here. This is Torn, or rather Red Gum, going up against the Southern Cross, as I guess everybody would expect to see. We see them battling. Lieutenant Smith is obviously going to be very much in the center of the storyline, with Torn somewhat smitten by her beauty. And this character in the second panel is a guy called Volgatung, and we're not going to tell you too much about that, but there's a little bit of a fantasy steampunky feel about this as well. So yeah, it should all be a lot of fun. That series will start promoting after the Rebirth series. So once again, the idea is that Rebirth is yes, it's a standalone storyline, but it's very much, for want of a better term, it's the first story where we're actually going to see the Southern Squadron, the Dark Nebula, and the Torn concepts all coming together to create a new universe, probably called the Reverie universe, if you like. But it's basically, as I said, it's the rebirth of superhero comics, yeah, we're very proud about it. And I do believe that there's a little touch of history, and if people want to get involved and be there, so that you can say, well, I wasn't there back in the Cyclone days, but I was there right at the start of this time round, then we really want to have you on the team.
Actually, having seen some more of those pages of Southern Squadron Torn, reminds me that Ben Sullivan's also doing the art for Dark Nebula Torn, and none of that's been coloured yet, but I've seen most of the artwork for the first issue, and that's a story that Hayden Sporrell and myself have crafted between us, and really it's Hayden's doing the scripting, and also Ben Sullivan's doing the art to that. And I have to say that the artwork I've seen for part one of that three-parter is breathtaking. We've got Torn in Dark Nebula's playground, which is outer space, and it's, let's just say that it's taking Torn places he's never been, and what we're doing with that is something completely different with Torn, because yeah, it starts off in a no-win situation for him, and that's all there is to that. But that's all I'm going to say about that. But I would like to point out that for that crossover, when it launches, I really think that that's going to be a story where Hayden and Ben will really shine. I mean, really, I was mainly in the plotting phase of it and signing off on everything, and to see this stuff, it's like, you know, you raise your kids up to a certain point, they got to go to college, and they come back, and all of a sudden you're looking at a different person, and it's like my kids have grown up, so to speak, and it's nice. And for me, there's all, you know, the glories to be had in creating the Dark Nebula, but I also like to see the spotlight shine on other people, and I think it's great that we're all able to share the spotlight, not just in Dark Nebula Southern Squadron, but also in Torn Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula Torn, because it means that we're getting the young Turks involved, and that's the important thing here. You know, when we do our Ugle Club of a Thursday night, you know, it's open slather. You know, if people who've only been in comics a few years want to be involved in that, you know, join us in that, that's great, you know, because it's not, you know, oh no, old farts only. It's there for anyone who's an Aussie creator, and I encourage anyone who is doing anything in Australian comics just to join us and share. You know, mainly we do a lot of piss farting about and jokes and all the rest of that, but you know, that's the camaraderie that we've got. But it's something for everyone who's an Australian creator, and that's the important thing. And like I say, with these crossovers, it's great that we're getting you know, young blood involved in them, because, you know, let's face it, you know, we all know that from the moment we're on this earth, we all have a use by date. We don't know when it's going to be, but you know, it's nice to know that there's going to be torchbearers once we go the way of the earth. And the other thing too, which I'll just wrap. Sorry.
In about 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, I know. In about 30 or 40 years. Don't worry, we haven't. We're not ready to kick the bucket anyway. But no, when all's said and done, our stuff is in the National Library in Canberra, so we're already a part of history, and that's and that. I mean, I've just sent off copies of my latest books to the National Library to keep the you know, the legal deposit going there as well. And so, you know, once we go the way of all things flesh and blood, you know, our stuff's going to endure, and that's all there is to it. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, like you said, Dave, we still got plenty of time to party.
Shane, I've put up a share screen. I don't know if you can. There we go. you'll probably, if you are picking up any of these books, you'll see this on the inside front cover, and this kind of gives you a little bit of a mud map of what's going to come. So we've got, we're calling this TDS 3 to the third, or if you like, it's called 3 to the third power. Basically, 3 miniseries, 3 team ups, 3 superhero sensations. The first set is Torn teaming up with Southern Squadron, which was the first idea that was proposed. Close on its heels is the Australian-owned super troubleshooter Southern Squadron teaming up with the Dark Nebula, and then Dark Nebula teaming up with Torn. So you can read the each set of 3 as a unique book in its own right. But you can also read all 9, and if you read the 9 together, then it gives you a full sense of what's going on. And so, as it says, the issues 1 and 4 coming soon to Reverie. So issue 4 will actually be, I know it sounds weird, but issue 4 is the first one that comes out. That's the Dark Nebula Southern Squadron book, Rebirth. Torn Southern Squadron is coming out in, I think the Kickstarter will be in sort of mid-January. Basically, we're waiting until one Kickstarter is completed, and then we move on to the next one. And one thing that anybody who's interested in Kickstarters, I know one of the most frustrating things is that you back it and then you wait a year before you get the book. Gary Della is really dead against that. So one of the things that we've been working on these off and on for probably the last 2 years, putting them all together, tying them in with what Tad's been doing with the 40th anniversary celebration. So the material exists, and the moment they go to the Kickstarter, we're going to the Kickstarter with everything ready to go to press. So the moment, the Kickstarter is complete, the printer will be cranking out the numbers that have been ordered, and they will be appearing within the month. So it's not like you'll be waiting and waiting and waiting.
That's awesome.
And Tad has also been doing a heck of a lot of work with, he's already shown you Dark Nebula 10. There's also Dark Nebula 11 and 12, which are coming out when, Tad?
Well, 11 is currently being offered around the Grail Hunters group on Facebook. It will go to comic shops and also the Owner Indie site very soon. There's the replica edition of Dark Nebula 1, or should say Dark Nebula 1 Remastered, which, by the way, was remastered by Dave. Dave is the unsung hero in this one, because I've been getting a lot of people who've been bugging the hell out of me for copies of Dark Nebula 1. Well, the fact of the matter is, if I fulfilled all those requests, I'd have run out of Dark Nebula 1s ages ago, and I'd still have people bugging me. So it just made sense to reissue Dark Nebula 1, a proper replica edition, different enough so people can't get that confused with the original. But the fact of the matter is, it'll be a nice placeholder for them. And most importantly, this in time will be rarer than the original, because the original had something like a 10,000 print run. This I've only done a couple of hundred. So in time, this is going to be the collectible to have. And issue 12 of Dark Nebula, which is, well, let's just say that it won't be far off from, there it is, from Dark Nebula 11, because it's part 2 of a 2-part story. And the one thing I hate is for people to be waiting nearly a year for the second part of a 2-parter. No, it's coming out a couple of months after Dark Nebula 11. And there's one of the covers, actually, Dave, if you've got the Sorellis cover there for Dark Nebula 12, there he is. No, that's you, Shane, isn't it? Sorellis looking like you.
Maybe 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, there is another version of this one. The point, there we are. That's your artwork, Shane. The point of that cover.
This is a Lee Chalker, which is
that's Lee Chalker. Yeah, and Lee's over the moon with being a part of the 40th birthday.
I think we're all over the moon with Lee being a part of it. It's he's a real talent.
Well, he's one of those many people who've said to me they got into comics because of Dark Nebula. Now, when they tell me that gives me a fair idea of how new to the scene, or relatively new to the scene, they were. compared to me, but it also reminds me how bloody old I am, because 40 years ago I was 22. Well, here I am 62 and still breaking wind and all the rest of that, but still doing Dark Nebula.
This is Peter Lane, who yes, you did actually see that correctly, Peter. So I just thought I'd share that one again.
Yeah, hairbutt in there.
Oh, yeah,
oh by the way, one of our audience happened to share the saying "Dark Greetings of the Night." G'day, Bo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Bo's tuned in for this. Yeah, and there he is. Dark Greetings of the Night yet again. Yeah. So, but anyway, the point of that Sorellis cover was that in Dark Nebula 4, there was a very similar looking image of Mark Medulla with that green background, and considering that was the second part of the 2-part Chaos War, and this is the sequel, the Chaos Theory, I thought, wouldn't it be great, like 30-something years later, bookend the cover with a Sorellis cover? And I will say this,
awesome.
the real star of Dark Nebula 12 is Sorellis, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So, yeah. But, yeah, no, we've been busy. We've... with all these other projects, and again, COVID has been the opportunity that
there
we've. You're right.
This is. Can you see it? It's sorry. We've
got a bit of shine there. Hang on.
Maybe that's not. Oh, gee, you can get a bit of a sense of it. There it is.
There it is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Mark Medulla, and so the bookend to that is the Sorellis cover you just saw.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah. Light's coming very hot off the screen. So,
yeah,
but yeah, the color has matched the same idea. So,
yeah. So yeah, we've been busy beavers over this last couple of years while everyone's been locked down with COVID and everything like that. Yeah,
sounds like
again, like what I was saying earlier. You can moan and groan and piss and moan and all the rest of that, or you can get busy. And like I said, after my car accident, I used that to forge ahead with everything else rather than let it get on top of me. And the rest of us, the really the Australian comics community has really seen the lockdown as an opportunity to do what we do best. I mean, when I attended a Ledgers Award a few years back with Gary Challoner and a few other people, I looked around the room and I thought, by definition, we're a pack of hermits. This is a gathering of hermits. Now, how is that possible? And I wondered what a collective term for hermits would be. And there is actually a collective term for hermits. I can't believe it, because it's such a contradiction in terms, but it's called an observance of hermits.
I thought it would be a crap of hermits.
I would have called, yeah, exactly. Well, I would have thought that it'd be like a distance of hermits or whatever, like who knows, like, honestly. But yeah, but by definition, being creators, we're off in our own little corner, doing our own little thing on our own. You put us all together in a room, it's like, getting a whole lot of people who've socially stunted to socialize with each other. Anyway, that's just me looking at the fun side of it all. Yeah.
Well, we should let people know how to find the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter link itself is a bit long for me to put up on the screen, but what I can put up is, if I go to the right screen here, I have a special link that takes you to the latest Kickstarters in Australian comics, and you will find the Dark Nebula Southern Squadron Kickstarter on the top row of that page. So that's a good link to go find it. Another way is just simply going to the search box, Dark Nebula Southern Squadron, and I'm pretty sure I did that today and it worked, and that will take you to the Kickstarter as well.
Actually, while you're there, if I can just click you the short link, Shane, and see if you can't share that with
I
everyone.
put it in the private chat. Put it in the private chat.
put it in the private chat.
Can you see that, or just put it in Messenger, one or the other?
I'll put it in Messenger because I don't know how to use this.
Yeah, that's
again,
fine.
I'll
That's
fart.
fine.
Yeah, bear with me. Actually,
Hey,
I'll
Omnivo.
just-
And if you're on Facebook, if you just Google Southern Squadron, or sorry, use the what do they call it? It's the search on Facebook. There's a Southern Squadron page. You'll find the link in there.
Yeah.
Gary and Tad and Bo have been spamming everybody relentlessly with the links. And if you think they're going to keep doing that, you're absolutely right. They're going to drive you nuts by the end of the month. I promise you. You're going to absolutely get overwhelmed with the stuff. We've got a whole bunch of other. Actually, can I share screen just one more time?
Yeah,
Shane?
of course.
There is a few add-ons which we've actually moved these forward a little bit because we had such a fast hit to the first target. So we've escalated this. So as well as the various different versions that are cover versions, Tad's also got available the Dark Nebula 10. So there's 100 copies of those. We've also got the Dark Nebula Southern Squadron cover B, which will be a metallic virgin variant, and there's 20 copies of those. And this is kind of cool. There's it says signed by 4. That's the Dark Nebula number 2, and it's signed by the 4 creators who are involved in it, being Tad, Glenn Lumsden, myself, and Gary Challoner. So there's 20 of those available. So, and those are the original printing. So that's kind of cool. That's the first time that in publishing history, that the Southern Squadron and Dark Nebula characters actually interacted. Actually, that was a cover that Glenn penciled and I painted. So that's going back quite some distance. And there will be additional add-ons released over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So for those of you who are sort of following this and you want to see what else is available, I know Tad's got quite a few little snippets that will be coming up over the next couple of weeks. So just, if this is something that you find appealing, just keep an eye out for it. There will be other little blasts from the past coming through as well.
Actually, on the signed books, I have to point out that this is the only time that all 4 foundation members of Cyclone, effectively we've got the band back together, so to speak, have signed, co-signed books. Oh yes, great. Well, that's your care package, mate. I sent Dave his care package of these books that he's been working on for me, and I have to. Well, actually, I'll get back to that in a moment. But this is the first time that the 4 foundation members of Cyclone have got together and co-signed any one book together. I mean, there are books that people have got that Dave and Glenn have signed, and that I've signed, and that Gary have signed, and whatever. But the 4 of us together, no, doesn't has never happened until now, and we're doing it with this Kickstarter. And that Dark Nebula 2 is not the only one. There are some other surprises we've got during the course of it. But I wanted to get that one out early for the simple reason that it has a definite connection with the Kickstarter itself. I want to circle back to the package that Dave's just shown with all these comics. Dave has been basically the glue for the Dark Nebula, because my skills take me only so far, and it's great that 2 of the Foundation Cyclone team are able to work together today, 30-something years on, and keep this material at its apex. Like, I'd hate to think that I'm putting out books that people might say, oh yeah, this used to be good 30 years ago, but it just doesn't quite seem to hold together. No. With Dave being the final filter and smicking it up like you wouldn't believe, it's like, we've taken it to a whole new level. And for that, I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me, Dave. and to be able, and as it goes, one hand washes the other, and we work together as a team. What helps one of us helps all of us, and that's really how I see it, rather than oh look, this is my comic and isn't it good and all the rest of that. No. I created the Dark Nebula, but where it is now is with the help of a lot of great friends, and for that I'm grateful.
Well, since we're having a love-in, I want to thank Shane for the fantastic work he's done on this. I'm a huge Kirby fan. That I've actually got a signed print that Glenn and I were lucky enough to meet Jack one afternoon in his home in
really?
In LA. Yeah, we had Dave Olbrich, who ran Malibu Graphics, was a friend of Jack and Roz's, and I had been pestering him for years. And then, not long before Jack died, he actually agreed to meet with us. Jim Hudnall actually joined us, and we spent probably about 3 or 4 hours at Jack's house, and it was like a museum. And that's a memory that I'll treasure. But just as we were leaving, he actually said, "Oh, we've got something for you," and it was he'd done a pre-signed print for me and one for Glenn. Glenn's was Bucky and Captain America. Mine was basically all the characters he created, which was like almost all of the Marvel ones. And I finally got around to getting that framed just before Jack died. And so if the Brossa came under fire, that would be the thing I'd throw under my arm more than anything else, and get out the door. So I love the Kirby-esque approach to comics, the dynamism. And there's a couple of guys working in the Australian scene right now that I think really capture the essence of it. I think you, Shane, more than anyone else, you really have nailed his aesthetic, and I love it. And it's that dynamic look. There's a bit of a shout out to Peter Lawson, who I think has he captures the spirit of Kirby he has these amazing dynamic covers. And I think Pete should ultimately specialize in cover art, because I think that's something that he really does well. And he really has captured that sort of Kirby-esque look. So, look, I've sort of found some stuff in comics getting a little bit losing its way. And there's sometimes, going back to basics and getting back to the greats, guys like Kirby, who really weren't necessarily the most realistic of artists, but that wasn't his thing. He understood comics as a medium. It wasn't just doing art in comic format. He was a comic book artist. And Shane, I think that you have taken the essence of that and woven it into your own stuff. I love the stuff you do on the Phantom, and I'm so proud to be working with you. I mean, it's great to have your work that you did with Tad on 11 and 12 coming out simultaneously, but this new stuff that you're doing, where we're seeing the Southern Squadron and the Dark Nebula sort of woven into this really interesting blend of what Tad was doing, what I'm doing, and then you're just sort of pulling it all together. To me, you're the glue, and it's an honor to work on your art. So thank you for being part of the team.
Well,
Here.
What can I say? That is really, really nice, because, being an artist, you're your own biggest critic. And usually what I see is what I haven't got right, and you're right about the Kirby thing, like I try to, but like our other favourite artist being John Buscema, but then Buscema had the more realistic, he had anatomy right and that sort of stuff. Yet even he recognised that Kirby was the prime comic artist, because he knew how to emotionally tell a story and all that. And that's what we go for. But I'm really gratified to think so highly of it, because I can always look at some of my own stuff and see how I could have done it better or different, and it's nice. It's really nice to be part of the team. I'm enjoying it. In fact, I'm intimidated. I look at some of the stuff because I shouldn't say that, because like I say, you just keep looking at your own weak points and look at the dynamics that other people have got. I love the quirkiness you got. And this, I'm talking about the old stuff now, the real quirkiness in a lot of it. And it was, and sometimes I wonder if I can match that, because I go for more, it's not really realistic, but different sort of style of the old quirkiness that was there, and I hope I get it a little bit. I was really happy when Tad said I think it was Tad said I loved the picture of the dingo you bought, and he was laughing his head off when he's driving the
howling at the moon. Yeah,
gun.
Can I show that again?
Yeah, go for it.
If you want, I don't know. It seemed to work. I was very happy with that. So
actually, circling back to Dark Nebula 10 just very briefly, and by the way, the word I was looking for was inventory, the world's longest inventory story. The fact that you did that artwork 30 years ago and it's being seen finally by most people 30 years later, it still stands up. You can be as critical as you like about it. I love it, and it's not dated. It is just as contemporary as it was the day it was first you first drew it. So that's me raising my objection, but in a nice way and for the right reasons too. There he is, howling at the moon. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Cool. So
it's with you because most of the Phantom material I do, I write my own stuff, which is good because you can get your own things. This stretches me something incredible because I probably wouldn't write scenarios like what you're doing, and it really gets you out of your comfort zone. But actually, Tad, it was really nice. I've seen the early copies of 11 and 12, and I look at them, and I haven't seen that artwork for years, and I can look at it a little bit more freshly, and I was happy with most of it too. I think, oh, good. You're not looking at it so critically, or it's not so familiar. So, but no, it's wonderful to be part of the team and doing it. And I'm on to book 2 now. I'm drawing the 6th page, which according to Dave's script is page 4. I'll hold up 2 pages and say, you, Dave, wanted me to do this in 1 page. I'll tell you what. So we're already 50% out of our page count. I'm pretty sure
the scripts are tight, man. They're very tight.
Yeah, it's always like I said, dynamic scene, 25 characters and a spaceship, and it's panel 6. You go, what? that only happened. I think that happened a couple of times in the other issue too, didn't it? But when you're spacing it out. But no, it's great fun.
It grew a little bit. Yeah.
He got you confused with George Perez there.
Yeah.
Now he could draw 25 people in a panel.
Yeah, and then the poor scripter has to find a place to put a word balloon. You go, come on.
No, that's my fault. So I end up having to pay that penalty anyway. So yeah, we found a way to make
fine.
It.
Yeah, well, it's good. I get on there and say, hey, I'm making this 2 pages, and the answer is always, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the advantages of.
Thanks for the lovely compliments, guys, and it's great.
Well, it's one of the advantages of being the letterer and the colorist. I can sort of, pull it together at the end if I've sort of stretched it too far. So no, look, I love what you've been doing, and for those listening in, what we're talking about is there were a couple of pages where Shane said, look, I can draw it in this number of panels, but wouldn't it be cool if, and then he'd send through the layouts and you go, yeah, screw it, we're going to add a couple of pages. And that's what half the fun of collaboration is that you he sees something in the story and he thinks, I think we can take this a little bit further. And then, when he explores that and bounces it back, you go, yeah, wow, that is taking this to a level that we didn't originally intend. And that's great. That's what makes it fun. So there's a lot of love in this series.
It really is. It's good.
And we give people more bang for their buck with more pages.
Yeah. So have we gone over time, Sizzle? I think we might have.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just around about an hour. Is there anything you want to say to everyone to just to say about the Kickstarter itself?
Look, I guess I just reinforce what we've already spoken about. That for me, I want people to come on board because they want to be a part of something new. This is not going to be a one-off series. This is part of a three-part series. The Southern Squadron, like the Dark Nebula, is already doing an ongoing series. I'm working with Gary Della to bring out a standalone Southern Squadron series, which will then flow out from the Southern Squadron Torn story. The Dark Nebula one's kind of set a little bit back in the past, so we're sort of we'll all be jumping like about 3 or 4. So this is almost like the backstory that sets up the foundation. Once the Southern Squadron and Torn storyline gets rolling, that's where a lot of the, the sort of the new direction of the Southern Squadron is really going to take off. So and we're sort of, you know how they do this in comics. Basically, it's going to be about 5 years into the future from when we last saw them. Is probably the best way to describe it. So they're a little bit older, a little bit wiser, but not really. But we're going to start to see a lot of fun things coming up. You know, they're going to have different bases in every Australian city. You know, one's based on a pub, another one's based on like in Adelaide, the city of churches, it's a refurnished cathedral. So we have a lot of fun with this stuff. They're going to have different uniforms fit for different purposes. There'll be stories set in space, in other dimensions, fighting different villains and so forth. Lots of crossovers. The version that of Southern Squadron Dark is kind of an alternate reality set of characters, but the Southern Squadron will meet them in that series as well. So, you know, there's a lot of new stuff coming through this, and I'm really hoping that, you know, people come on board and enjoy the journey. This feels as close to what we were doing when we started out doing Cyclone, but back then we were kind of, I won't say we were fumbling, but it was new. We didn't, you know, we'd never done anything like this. There's something about going through the motions again and knowing where the journey's going to take you and knowing what's going to work and what's not, because we've walked the path before. There's a real familiarity about it. I know there's a lot of people out there who have wanted to see these characters come back for a long time. I know that because I've been pestered about it probably for the last 10 years. And I just wasn't personally ready to do it. But then over the last 2 to 3 years, with, you know, the conversations with Tad, the conversations with Gary Della, with Shane, with all these amazing, talented people that we're sort of, it's just happening. And if you want to, this is, to me, it feels like the Beatles are getting back together. It really does. And if you want to be a part of something that is a standalone, something that's new and exciting. I mean, Sizzle, you and Gary have done a lot to, you know, effectively create this renaissance period of, I don't know, what age are we in now? It's the modern age. I don't know. We had the Bronze Age, which was when we were doing it. Yeah. Well, somebody's got to come up with a name, because there is something very unique about this period. You've got the Killaroo with Darren Close. That's sort of part of it. And like Darren and I, we're talking about a Killaroo crossover storyline, and that's going to weave very tightly into the, you know, the mainstream story as well. There's just, so, you know, we are building the foundation of what will be a superhero universe that, you know, it's going to be, you know, when we were starting out, there was this idea of Marvel Down Under, and this is as close as I've seen to, you know, something along those lines. So awesome. And we're at that stage in our careers where it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We can take our time. We're not in a rush to get anywhere in a hurry. Failure isn't an option because we're all successful. You know, I don't care if I make money out of this. I really don't give a shit. It's not about that. Tad sort of summed it up when he said it's a legacy. I'm doing this because, you know, I want people to come on board. I mean, I so love working with Spedsy on the script for the Dark Nebula Torn. Gary said I could just do it on my own. I said, no, I want to work with other people. I want to, so that, you know, and he knows that if he wants to just the toilet age here, he knows that if I want, if he wants to, you know, take the characters and have a run with them, that's great, you know. I want to think that, you know, when Tad and I do, you know, 40, 50 years from now, we're no longer around, that, you know, people will still be having fun with our characters, playing with them, and there is a legacy. 40 years is a bloody long time. When we started, I have to keep putting this in. To me, Stan and Jack were the masters, and yet when we started, we were only 25 years after they had begun Marvel. So we're actually, going back and revisiting our stuff, and the gap between what we were doing back then is 40 years. That's like 15 years further back than when we were doing Cyclone and comparing that to the beginning of the Marvel age. So there's been a lot of water under the bridge. Australia does have this really rich superhero history, which, sprung up, I guess, first off with, Brainmaster and Vixen and the vampire stuff that Gerald Carr was doing. And then, then Tad came out, 40 years ago with Dark Nebula, Southern Squadron soon after, and then Bodine and all these other people started to bring stuff out. We saw Headbutt the Hippo. There was such a vitality, such an excitement that happened in the 80s and the early 90s. And then it kind of, let's say, it just sort of went into a little bit of a slumber. And it's all waking up again, and it's really exciting. And so for those people who, missed out the first time round because you were a little bit too young or whatever, here's your chance to be a part of it. And, we really want you to be part of it and come on board.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Actually, my perspective is that we're having a party, and your invite is by clicking that Kickstarter, and you get to be involved in that way. It's the only way I can describe it.
So get on board, people.
Oh, did you get that link that I flicked you?
Yeah, I sent the link
Shane?
out to everywhere that it lets me send it out to. So yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's the abbreviated version, which Gary Della flicked across to me, which means that people don't have to hurt themselves trying to remember what it is. Kind of like people trying to pronounce my surname. I say to them, "Don't hurt yourself."
It's easy to pronounce. It's P. Tad P. It's easy.
Yeah,
it's easy.
that's right.
If we're signing off, can I just say I just want to thank you, Sizzle, not just for what you're doing with this podcast, but just with the Drink and Draw, with everything that you've done to become like a conduit for all of the comic creators in Australia. What Gary Della's doing with Reverie is fantastic, but you're sort of going beyond that. You're sort of, you're not just creating comics, you're actually sort of creating a network. And that's amazing. And, I can't thank you enough for that. I mean, your influence over the comic scene at the moment is so central and so important, and it can't be overstated. I want to thank all of the people who've sort of encouraged Tad and myself and others to come back and do this. As I said, I've already mentioned Spedsy, Hayden, all of the Peter, George, all of the people who are working at Reverie, who are letting us, either they're playing with us or letting us play in their space. Shane, to come back after, because I mean, you were there back in the early days, like maybe not 40 years ago, but 35 is not bad, So I mean, you've been there right from the start.
Me.
Yeah. And then even guys like Gary Challoner, who, there is still that connection. He's doing his own thing with Cyclone, but the Cyclone universe that Gary's playing with, like what we're doing, all sort of grew out of the same sort of source. Yes, the Southern Squadron are part of the Flash Domingo universe. That'll never, ever be separated out. It can't be. And so, what Gary Challoner is doing, that's part of what we're doing as well. And then you've got Tim McEwen, who's part of that world now. So it's such an exciting world. I'm hoping over time we see Bug and Stump, we see Headbutt, we see all these characters sort of coming into these stories. And
that'd be amazing.
So I just want to thank everybody who's doing it now, everybody who's done it in the past, anybody who wants to get involved and do it going forward. This is a very exciting time for the Australian comic scene. And if you are even just the slightest bit of this, even if you are just buying comics because you want to be a part of it, I just really want to thank you. Whether you buy our comics or buy, The Devil's Toilet, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You're buying Australian comics. You're part of what makes this renaissance happen. And so even if you're just watching this podcast, you're part of it, because the fact that you give a shit, and we're back to the devil's toilet. That's
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. It's been a really good show. I've really loved learning a bit more about you guys. So even though I get to talk to you like most weeks, I've learned a little bit more tonight. So that's been really cool. To anyone who wants to support, we've given out the links. I gave the short link on the page as well. Just go to Kickstarter, just put in Dark Nebula or Southern Squadron. It will come up. Support this. It is the start of something huge, I reckon, something epic. So get in there on the ground floor, as they say. And, just check out the magic that these guys have created.
And it is magic.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. That's great.
Yep. Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you, everyone who watched. And thank you, everyone who watches the replays. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe to the channel.
Yay. There we go.
That'd be awesome if you could do that so you don't miss out on any of our future videos. And on that note, thank you very much. Have a great night and see you on the next show. See you all.
Thanks, mate. Catch you later.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Jazz
Check out
hands.
ComX.cx for all things ComX and find out what ComX is all about. We hope you